Yes, Rich, we're ready.
Okay, looks like we've got quite a few folks, almost 30 folks on the Join Me app to do the screen share. If you're not currently on there and you're on the phone, please be sure to click the join.me/PCA mainconf link that's in the invite that was sent out about 15 minutes ago.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us for the Making Teammates Better workshop demo. Joe and I are going to team up as co-facilitators for this. We encourage you guys, the last call in particular, we really appreciate the way that you all role-played with us as workshop participants, especially when it was time to chime in and answer questions and share your perspective. So really encourage you to do that again. Brandon replied to me with a couple of really good questions about this workshop. And Brandon, we're actually going to address those questions after the demo because Courtney will be particularly insightful on that. And she's finishing up a senior staff meeting now and will join us when that's finished. So we'll address those questions at the end of the workshop, and any other questions people have, of course, we should have time to discuss those. Joe, are you able to take us to slide 10 in the deck? So slide 10 here is really the outline of this workshop. Actually, let's go back, Joe, one slide to 9. So this workshop is meant to focus on the second part of being a triple impact competitor, the Making Teammates Better part. Okay, so, and now Joe will go forward again. And we do that by dividing the workshop into these 4 sections. The role of filling emotional tanks and how we can be emotional tank filling teammates. That's the first section. Playing a leadership role and how high-performing teams get leadership from lots of different areas, not just the captain, not just the senior, etc. Then we talk about hazing and why people haze, the consequences of hazing, and then we finish with an alternative to hazing, positive alternative to hazing, which is making new players feel welcome. And that section's divided into informally welcoming new players and formally welcoming new players through positive initiation. So this is really the outline of the workshop right here. Okay, so Joe's going to kick us off. Joe, so whenever you're ready, you can launch in with the start of the workshop.
Fantastic. Good morning, everybody. I'm getting a little echo from somebody. I would be grateful if everybody who is not currently talking through their mute on, whether it's on their phones or their computers or their apps, whatever they're doing. Thanks for having us back. We had such a great time at your Triple Impact Competitors Workshop. For the athletes, we're excited to dig a little deeper into some of the ideas from that workshop. How many of you were at the other athletes workshop? And we clamor and we talk about stuff. So I'm going to start right off the bat by asking you to think through sort of a teammate's role in a tricky situation. And what I'd like you to do is, if you have, I gave you all playing cards at the outset. Darn it, hang on. It's just, my PowerPoint is messing up. Give me one second, guys. Never happens in a workshop. We never have technical problems in a workshop. So, once again, you were given a playing card from the deck of playing cards that I got from United Airlines this morning. If you are a red card, you are a number 1. If you're a black card, you are a number 2. So what I'd like you to do first of all is pair up 1s and 2s. Each pair should have a 1 and a 2. And my colleague Ruben will be the extra man if we have an odd number, if that's okay with Ruben. And I just want to describe what the 1s and 2s are. You're each going to play a role. So the starter has a bad half. We'll explain that in a minute. And what happens is the coach in the game decides to start the backup player. So let's talk about who the starter is. The starter is an impact position like a quarterback or a point guard. You've had a great season and a great record. You're one of the best in the whole country. It's college basketball or college football or some college sport. Your task is going to be to tell your partner how you feel about the fact that your coach said, hey, you know, you've had a great season, but we really need to switch up for the second half. So you're going to explain to your partner how you feel. The number twos are the backups. You're a true freshman. You've had limited playing time so far this season. And your job, after number one has told you how he feels, is to tell number one about what you need to hear to succeed. You have 2 minutes to talk to your partner. Go. And we time out 2 minutes. So I would like some real answers. I'd like an answer from anybody who wants to play the role of a number one, the starter, and say, how do you feel about being pulled for the second half? Anybody want to chirp in on that? That's
disappointed.
Yeah, disappointed. I wonder that's a very nice word. That I would be pretty disappointed. Good. Any others?
Like I let my teammates down.
Wow, that's heavy. You let your teammates down. So that was Keenan, correct? Quick question,
Yes.
Keenan. Do you feel that a player who's had a rough half, as an outsider looking at the game, do you feel they've let their teammates down? As an outsider?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I think it depends on the situation, but I can't give a firm yes or no either way. But
sure.
Yeah,
sure. I think it's a great point, and I think what you bring up is when you're the one in the situation, it certainly drives some strong emotions, or could potentially do so. How about my number twos? Could I get I'm sorry, Ken, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I think if the numbers or the statistics weren't there, that wouldn't necessarily be a letdown to me as a teammate. But if there was laxed effort or focus, then yes, there would be.
Great. Wow, great. You are apparently one of the ones who went to the earlier workshops, correct, Keenan?
Yeah, I've been around the block.
Yeah, so I heard. So that's a great point. How about the number twos? You're backup, you're a freshman, you're coming in, it's halftime, championship game on the line. What do you need to hear? What needs to happen for you to succeed in this game?
And my coach feels like I've proved myself to earn this, and they feel confident. They believe in me that I can handle it.
That's a great. So I love that you also indicated who you needed to hear it from, which was the coach. How about, is there anything? What do you expect to hear, or what do you need to hear from the quarterback who's coming out, or the point guard, or the impact player who's coming out?
Maybe I was going to say maybe some insights of, what's been going on in the game, maybe a little kind of confidence, motivation, like you got this.
Yeah, so we have, right off the bat, we're into slide one, we have conflict. We have a player coming out who's maybe disappointed, maybe upset, maybe feels like he or she let their team down, and then we have somebody coming into the game that maybe needs to hear encouragement from that particular person, from just the things that you said. Has anybody ever heard of a situation like this, or seen anything happen similar to this in real life? Keenan is not allowed to answer.
The college football championship game.
Yeah, I was doing this at a workshop in Winona State University in Minnesota. One kid just said, "Roll Tide." So apparently they had heard it. So let's look at what really happened.
Here with Jalen Hurts. Jalen, just been shaking your head. You've had that smile on your face. Your reaction when you found out Tua was going to start the second half, honestly. He was going to step in and do his thing. We have a lot of guys in the QB room that play really well, and he stepped in and did his thing. Did his thing for the team. In every offensive huddle, you were right there next to him throughout the second half and overtime. What was your message to him? Ball. Play your game. Ball. He's destined for stuff like this. He's built for stuff like this. He has an impact, and I'm so happy for him, happy for the team. What does it mean to you to be a national champion? It's unbelievable. I dreamed about this. Congratulations, Jalen. Thanks.
Wow. So those two collegiate football players won a national championship game through that exact scenario and situation we just described. And even afterwards, the media were giving Jalen Hurts some trouble and just questioning his performance. And right after that on Twitter, the backup quarterback, Tua, he came and said, "Hey, Jalen's my guy." And Jalen spoke up and said, he called him his little brother and said how proud he was of him. Who can tell me what the title of this workshop was?
Making teammates better.
Well, see, that's the are you awake question. Good job. Do you feel these teammates, it's sort of an obvious question, I feel like these teammates made each other better. Anybody want to dissent on that one? You're welcome to. And you probably won't, so I'm going to move past that. What I'm going to do is hand the workshop over to my colleague, Ruben Nieves, and he's going to take us from there. Are you potentially muted, Ruben?
I was muted, but boy, I was doing so great too.
Well, and you can practice that.
Thank you, Joe. So, hey, let's take a look at another situation that involves making teammates better. And anybody recognize this photograph? Anybody know what this photograph is from? Is Jason Pratt on? I wonder if Jason recognizes it. If Jason were on, he would tell us this is a World Cup semifinal soccer game, and that the U.S. player involved here is Julie Johnson. Let's take a look at what happened here. So it seems like we lost audio there, and so I'll tell you what happened there. You saw it, but I'll describe it. Julie Johnson committed a penalty at a critical part in the game, which gave Germany a penalty kick. And so let's say you were in this situation. How would you handle this situation as a teammate? When I say go, I want you to turn to a participant near you. Let's take a few seconds. How would you handle this situation? Go. So we take a couple seconds on that. And 3, 2, 1, let's come back together. Another question for you. How would you want to be treated if you were Julie Johnson and committed the penalty? Again, with your partner, 30 seconds, go. Yeah, let's come back together as a group. Can I get a response to the first question from the group?
I feel like
it would depend.
Go ahead, Marty.
I was going to say, I think it would depend on which teammate, because some teammates react differently or like need different types of motivation. Some teammates, after they make a mistake, like, how would you handle this situation? You know, I would want to help prepare them for the next play, to be able to bounce back, and just encourage them that they, you know, hey, you'll get them next time.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Marty. Someone else was going to chime in there.
Yeah, this is Brandon. I just would go with what Marty was saying. I would. It seemed like she was being aggressive. I would just tell her to keep being aggressive, and it was a bang play, and you know, keep defending hard.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. And how about the second question? What if you were Julie Johnson in this situation? How would you want to be treated?
I would want support from my teammates.
Is that Taylor?
It's Maggie.
Maggie, thank you, Maggie. You would want support from your teammates. Okay, well, let's take a look at what really happened here. And actually, a couple of Julie's teammates actually took different approaches. And Marty, you said it might depend on the situation, might depend on the player. Johnson's teammate, Carly Lloyd, took a tough love approach. Hey, Kelly Kratz, can you, if you're there, can you unmute and read what Carly Lloyd said to Julie?
Sure. She said, I remember telling her, no time for tears. We got a game to play.
Okay, so that was one approach. And then the second approach was Becky And Becky, according to Julie Johnson, what Becky did impacted her the most and provided her the most comfort, the most support. Kelly, what did Becky say? Or what did Julie say about Becky?
I'm not sure yet.
Oh, okay. It's there. Oh, you don't. Oh.
There it is. She said, Becky's my backbone. She keeps me sane. She's a warrior. I just always want to play well for her in the back line. Seeing her look at me and smile, other than the opposite way, really made me take a deep breath and just kind of reevaluate that we're still in this game.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for jumping in to help me here. And so, you know, what we just saw were a couple of examples of teammates in big situations, on big stages, working very hard to support their teammates, to make their teammates better. And that's what this workshop is about, as Joe mentioned earlier. Those of you who were at the last workshop know that a triple impact competitor is committed to making three things better. First of all, a triple impact competitor wants to make themselves better, make themselves the best athlete they can be. But they don't stop there, because they're also committed to making their teammates better, those around them better. But a triple impact competitor doesn't stop there either, because by the way they compete, by the way they conduct themselves on and off the field, in and outside of the uniform, they actually elevate the sport that they play. They make the game better. So in this workshop, we're going to focus on making teammates better, and we're going to have four main topics that we're going to explore together. We're going to talk about the importance of filling emotional tanks and ways that we can fill teammates' emotional tanks. We're going to talk about the role of leadership in making our teammates better. We're going to talk about hazing and why hazing exists in sports, and what are the consequences of hazing. And then finally, we're going to talk about the positive alternative to hazing, which is making new players feel welcome both informally and formally. So getting back to emotional tanks, go ahead and click forward. So you saw two examples there of athletes being supported by their teammates. And in the second example, it was supporting a teammate after a mistake. What are some other ways that we can fill our teammates' emotional tanks and support them? And let me just make sure that, remind folks that an emotional tank is similar to a gas tank of a car. We all have one, and we perform that. Just like our car performs better, goes further when it's got a full tank of gas, we all perform better, we go further. We're better teammates when our emotional tanks are full. Okay, so this time I want, let's use the playing cards that Joe passed out. I want you to pair up with someone that has the same number of playing card that you have. Find someone with the same number and let's talk about this. Ready? Go. All right, and let's come back together again. I want to hear from some of you. What were some of the ideas you or your partner came up with?
Ruben, one is we've got sort of a secret handshake that we do amongst the team. And so somebody makes a mistake or is out of position, we do the handshake. It takes 2 seconds, and that's our back and ready to play.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. What else?
Sometimes we just laugh about it. We just like smile and joke, and then we go, all right, cool, and we move on.
Okay. Thank you, Jack. One more. Can I get one more? So I want you to take a look at the bookmark that you received when you came in today. And on the front side of the bookmark are several other emotional tank filling tools that teammates can use. I want you to read through this list of 7 or 8 tools. And as you read through them, the one that you think you're best at, I want you to put a star by it. The one that you think your team needs the most improvement on, I want you to put a check mark by it. Okay, I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that. Okay, and I want to hear from you which one you gave a star to, the one that you personally think you're the best at. And so I would take a few of those, and then I'd follow up with the question. Let's hear a few that you think that your team could use the most improvement in. So I like doing that, just like we want to make the book in the workshop a part of the workshop. We want to do the same thing with the bookmark, and that's one place where we can do that. Okay, so Joe, let's click forward. So we're talking about ways that athletes can fill each other's emotional tanks. Kevin Durant here, who now plays for the Warriors, tells a story in this video of a time when a teammate filled his emotional tank. And it was a time where he really needed tank filling. Joe, I'm not getting any volume on it. I don't know if others are not getting the volume. So those of you who aren't familiar with this clip, Kevin Durant is talking to his teammate at the time, Caron Butler. And he talks about how when he was in a slump mid-season and feeling down, and the team was on a losing streak, he remembers opening his locker, and there's a piece of paper there, and it says KD MVP. And Kevin Durant says, Caron, you wrote a piece of paper in my locker. That's the language that Kevin used. And he talked about how a simple note from a teammate meant so much to him and lifted him at a very difficult time. So let's transition here. We've been talking about filling emotional tanks. Let's talk about a related topic, which is leadership. Let's hear from former National Basketball Association Most Valuable Teammate. In his last season in the NBA, he was voted by players throughout the league as the league's most valuable teammate, Shane Battier. Let's hear from Shane. Hey, Joe, I'm still not getting any sound. Are others, is anybody hearing this video?
No.
We can't hear.
Okay, so this is the video where Shane says that leadership has very little to do with talent, that to lead you have to set a good example, you have to work hard. And so we follow up the video by asking the group, and I'll ask it to you all. Do you agree that leadership has little to do with talent? Can I get a couple of you to respond to that, and why or why not?
I think that leadership is easier when you have talent and when you're a star player, because it puts you in a natural role of people looking at you and responding to you. But I don't think that's a requirement to be talented to be a leader.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that if you are one of the more talented players, that leadership could come more easily and that people might look to you more often for leadership. So so that it can have a little bit to do with talent, but that in order to lead, it doesn't mean that you have to be one of the best players. Did I hear you correctly, Brandon? Did I paraphrase you correctly?
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Brandon. Anybody else on this?
Well, here's what I know. In my high school, if you're the best player, you become the captain. The coaches pick you as captain. So I don't know if everybody necessarily wants to listen to them, but that seems to be the way it goes in my school. The best players become the captains, and they become the leaders, no matter what their attitude is.
Okay. Thank you. That was Kelly, right? Was that Kelly, or was that Maggie again?
No, that was Kelly, and that was an answer I got at a workshop last time I did this.
And so let me ask you, if you were coaching a team, if you all were coaches of a team, how would you decide who would be your captains? Would you take the same approach that Kelly's coaches have taken?
I would
not
want
necessarily.
someone who works hard and gets along with everybody.
Someone who works hard and gets along with everybody? You think that's a more important factor in who's captain as opposed to who's the most talented? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. And who is that? Who is that?
This is Maggie.
Thanks again, Maggie. And then did I hear Marty's voice there?
Yeah, I agree with Maggie. I would look to see who has the most influence on the team. Who do people naturally gravitate towards? Maybe someone that has a lot of enthusiasm and kind of is able to naturally motivate everyone else. Those are the people that usually make great captains, even if they're not the best when it comes to their performance out there on the playing field.
And so, Brandon, you said earlier that leadership can be influenced by talent level. And in talking with you before the workshop, I realized you played on a lot of high-level teams yourself. How about the captains of the various teams that you played for? How was it decided, Brandon? And was it always the player with the most talent that was made captain?
The teams that I played on, a lot of the captains were chosen by the team themselves. There would be, kind of a voting, or the players would kind of say who they wanted the captains to be, and then usually the coaches would kind of fill the gaps with people that were maybe not recognized that they thought should have been.
Brandon, can I ask you, of all the captains you played with, which one stood out as the strongest leader and why?
Oh man, that's tough. I would say that, I was just at the Eagles Super Bowl parade, so I had a chance to run into my old teammate Brian Dawkins, who's a Hall of Famer, and I thought that he was probably one of the most influential leaders and captains that I ever played with, because he, no matter what, whether it was practice or walkthrough or a game or pregame or after a game, he was so energetic and gave 110% every single time. And it was infectious.
So he had some talent, but there were some other things that he brought to the table that made him such a great captain, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Brandon. Joe, can we click forward here? So here's what Coach Van Pelt has to say about being a great leader. It says, being a great leader is about making those around you better. So whether you have the title of captain, whether you're a senior, whether you're a veteran, can you find ways to make those around you better? If you do that, if you find ways to make those around you better, according to Coach Van Pelt, you are leading. So let's take a look at a scenario here. So you want to help your team do well, but some of your teammates don't seem to care as much as you do. What can you do? Okay, this time I want, if you have, this time you're going to pair up with someone that has the same suit, same card suit as you. So if you have a diamond on your card, you're going to be talking with a diamond. Go find somebody. 1 minute to do this. Go. And time is up. Let's come back together as a group. Can I hear from a couple of you? How would you handle this situation? What can you do in this situation?
I think that you got to let people know that you care. I think that sometimes, especially in high school sports, not caring is kind of like maybe that's what you think is cool. You don't want to care too much because then maybe you'll be thought of as a kiss ass or something like that. But I think if other people on the team show that they care, then you understand that that's part of the culture.
Okay, awesome. Showing them, not being afraid to show your teammates how much you care. Okay, thank you very much, Brandon. Let's hear from somebody else.
I would ask them what their goals are.
Was that Marty? Were you saying ask them what their goals are?
This is Maggie.
Maggie, I'm still not recognizing your voice. Okay, so asking some questions so asking some questions and finding out what their goals are. What do you want to get out of this? Okay, very good, Maggie. Thank you. Someone else was chiming in.
Yeah, this is Amy. I was saying it'd be great if you could sort of notice what you think they could contribute as a leader, and sort of point that out to them and say how much you appreciate that they have, this ability to do this or to lead or to they just point out things that you could ask them to sort of, help that you believe in them and with that quality, that leadership quality, and how you'd love to see them do it more. Just sort of notice something about them that you can praise them for, that you'd like them to lead with more.
You're one of the fastest runners on the team. When we do sprints at the end of practice, you have the ability to really push all of us when you go as hard as you can. Like that, Amy?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well,
you're really funny. I love how you lift our spirits and make everyone laugh. I'd love to see you do more of that. Keep doing that. It's awesome. We love it.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Let's take a look at some takeaways here. So first of all, these are some suggestions from PCA, and where does PCA get its suggestions from? We get these suggestions from great athletes and great coaches around the country, and we've summarized them here for you. So the first one is that addressing a teammate who doesn't seem to care as much as you do, it's definitely most strategic, most effective to have that conversation one-on-one, right? Not in front of others, not publicly calling the teammate out, but doing it in a one-on-one way. Empathize to understand. Can anybody tell me what the word empathize means?
I think the best way of describing it is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah, understanding their point of view and where they're coming from, and what would it feel like to be in their situation, in their shoes. That's exactly what empathizing is. And at PCA, we think that your first conversation, that first one-on-one conversation, should be all about trying to empathize and get where your teammate is coming from. Okay, share your commitment. Boy, this is what Brandon was talking about. Show how much you care, by being a great example. And then, when you have a suggestion to make, one way to do it, one strategy for doing it is starting with these words. Hey, Joe, in order for us to be as good as we can be, we need you to be on time for practice. Okay, but framing it not so much about Joe and his behavior, but about helping the team be as good as we can be. And then finally, rewarding what you want to see. When your teammate does do things that move the team in the right direction, when your teammate does make the effort to care and show that they care, that you notice it, you comment it, and that you praise them for it. Joe, let's go forward. So if you're on a team that has conflict. If you're on a team where it seems like some players care more than others, that's actually the norm. Most teams, including championship teams, have conflict. What separates the championship teams from the others usually is their ability to deal with it effectively. Let's click forward, Joe. Okay. In the Triple Impact Competitor Workshop, we talked about the magic ratio. Magic ratio is the ratio of tank filling to tank draining, of praise to correction, that produces the best results, the best relationships. Does anybody remember what it was, the magic ratio? Somebody
5 to 1.
5 to 1. 5 to 1. Thank you. Yeah, and so 5 to 1 is a goal, it's a target, it's a guideline that we strive for over the course of time. Hopefully, our coaches are working to fill emotional tanks of players and staff. But there's a lot more of you, there's a lot more of us players than there are of coaches. So what's even more important to the success of a team than having tank-filling coaches is having tank-filling players. So the magic ratio is a tool you can use and always keep in mind as you interact with your teammates. You strive for that 5 to 1 over the course of time. And Joe, let's click forward. So Joe, I'm going to hand it over to you for the next section of the workshop.
Fantastic. We're talking about standing up against hazing. Thank you very much, Ruben, for covering those thoughts about filling our teammates' emotional tanks and becoming a leader on our team. And it's great to hear there's so much expertise out there from the athletes too. That's pretty fun. So hazing. I'm going to give you a sort of the textbook-ish definition of hazing in a second. But before we do that, do you guys know anything about? Is it a word you're familiar with? What do you know about hazing? What is hazing? Don't really want to hear news stories, but just definition. What is hazing?
Making someone do something that they don't want to do or they wouldn't willingly do.
Don't want to do or wouldn't willingly do. Great. What else?
A team ritual that is passed on from year to year. Okay, so we've heard a couple things. It's undesirable. People don't want to do it, and it's a ritual, and it's gone on for some time apparently. Anybody else? Anybody want to chime in on what they think is important about hazing?
So forced initiation.
Forced initiation. That's a great couple words to describe that there. And now let me throw you the hardball question. Is it the same as bullying? Is hazing the same as bullying? Now, I'm not, there's a lot of nuance to this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Kind of.
Kind of, right. There are definitely some similarities between hazing and bullying. And I will refer back to this in just a second after the formal definition of hazing. The formal definition is that hazing is it's just like we talked about, negative form of initiation into a team or group in which new members are forced or pressured to do things that are embarrassing or uncomfortable or degrading in some way. And the word that comes up a lot to describe hazing is bullying. And one of the things that's interesting about the difference, they're very different things in some ways. The difference between hazing and bullying is that hazing is an act of inclusion. Hazing is a way that you become part of the team, whereas bullying is an act of exclusion in most cases. It's a way that we separate kids on the playground. It's a way that we make people feel like they're outside of a group. So can anybody give me an example that they've heard of in the news about hazing or something that they've seen? If you've seen it here, we'll talk about it after the workshop, but something that they've heard of maybe from another school or in the news.
Yeah, how
Boys
about a
have to shave
team
their
forcing? Yeah, literally what I was going to say. Exactly.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't catch either one. I apologize. Forcing what?
Forcing boys to shave their heads. Yeah.
Forcing boys to shave. I mean, really, is that hurting anybody? Come on. Is that hurting anybody?
How about forcing new members of the team to wear like a ridiculous outfit around campus?
Is there a big deal there? Does that difficult for people to do? Or hair cutting, changing your appearance?
It could be. Hey, it could be for some members of the team. Or how about if
I agree with that. I
or
think that's
members,
a great point.
yeah.
No, you can
members having to do like a dance in front or a song in front of everybody.
Exactly. Embarrassing, uncomfortable, degrading. And I actually really like what somebody said. I forget who said it. When you were defining, I think you put one in there that we should probably put on the slide, which is something that they didn't want to do. They didn't want to do this. So what happens when teams use hazing as a means of initiating players to the team? You can see some of the things here that maybe kids don't want to play on the team. It drives people away from the team, or it gives bullies, and certainly there are relationships between bullying and hazing, a way that's sanctioned. So everybody else says it's okay. It's okay, and it can cause some very dangerous situations and have some legal outcomes. Are there any other consequences anybody wants to bring up that they see might happen as a result of hazing, or that they've seen in, again, a news story or from another school? Again, if we're going to talk about our school, you and I can talk about that after the workshop with the athletic director and the coach. But anything that you've heard of anywhere else that's another consequence of hazing? Doesn't necessarily need to be an answer. And I see there are none. So now here's the important part. I'm actually going to talk about one that's maybe a little interesting here. Why do people do this? Why would this come up? Why would you choose to do this to bring a new player onto your team?
Someone mentioned it before. It's like habitual.
It's a ritual, right? It's what happened to me when I was a freshman. Mm-hmm. So, these guys have to do it now. And one of my colleagues recently said that, one definition of hazing as opposed to a great tradition is you look back and you say, boy, I'm glad I don't have to do that again. So yeah, great point. Why else?
I mean, I guess it's a means of passage. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a rite of passage. So that's, and I'm going to cover a couple of those. Some are tradition. Is tradition the same as hazing? Are there good traditions and bad traditions? We're going to talk about that a little bit. I'm not going to address that right now, but keep that question in your mind for a second. People think it improves performance. It makes us better. It makes us stronger. This notion that, by getting brought onto the team in a way that was so difficult, now you're ready to be tough like we are on a team. And then some people, again, maybe they act like bullies. They feel like this gives them some power. And finally, it's really hard. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. It's really hard to go against your friends. It's really hard to be in a locker room or out on a soccer pitch or at your event or your practice for the first day and say, you know what, this isn't me. This is wrong. If you remember, one of the things we talked about in the last workshop about respecting yourself. And I don't believe this is right. So do I respect myself enough to do something about it? Here's the tricky question, I think. What psychological need does hazing fulfill? Any guesses on, or not guesses, even but thoughts on that? It's not really a right answer, but there's something that I'd like you to think about. What good does it do for you to haze? What good does it do for everybody on the team to haze? Why would you support this?
It's a sense of power.
It is a sense of power, absolutely. And any other needs that you're fulfilling here? Any positive needs you're fulfilling? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I think also the sense of inclusion and we're connected and we're a family.
I'm sorry, I couldn't catch whose voice that was. Who was that, please?
It's Maggie again.
Oh my God, Maggie. Maggie's like the Rich Little of PCA. So yeah, Maggie, great point. And that's a positive thing, right? You get to be part of our family, part of our team. And I think there really is a sense of pride maybe that underpins that to say, hey, it's a big deal to be on this team. We have a great tradition. We have a great team. We have a great family here. And you don't get to be a freshman and just walk out here and gain all of that prestige and advantage right off the bat. So definitely it's a way of becoming something good. And I'm going to refer back to that in just a minute. What would you say this phrase means? Moral courage? Or, you know what? Don't answer that. Give me an example you've seen on your team of moral courage. What you think is moral courage. What's something you see on your team? What is it hard to do? What's something one of your real teams in real life, my lovely PMs and PSMs and pluses and hopefully no minuses people? I'm gonna make Brandon talk again if you force me to do this. What's something on your team that was hard to do that you saw somebody speak up for?
Speaking to a coach if you feel a coach is in the wrong.
Wow, that's a tough one. Is that has anybody seen that experience? I would cover that. I'm not going to do that right now. But that's a great conversation starter, standing up to your coach. And look, the first two words are perfect. Standing up for what you think is right, even when your friends and teammates disagree. And I did want to remind you of that workshop we did a couple months ago where we said that respecting yourself, this is the definition of respecting yourself. You believe a thing, and now it's time for you to stand up for it and put your actions behind your beliefs.
Hey, Joe Rubin here.
Thank you, Rubin.
I just, what Brandon said, I remember when I was coaching the volleyball team at Stanford, and we were going over the scouting report, and we were talking about a particular player for another team, and I used a term to identify the ethnicity of this player. And the player was Asian, and the term I used was Oriental. And after the meeting, one of the players on the team, and he wasn't a senior, he wasn't a captain, he said, "Hey, coach, can I tell you something?" And he said, the Asian people don't like the term Oriental, and they, it's considered a derogatory term. And I just, I appreciated it so much because I didn't know. And two is my respect for that player went even higher than it already was for him having the moral courage, as Brandon pointed out, to talk to me about that.
Thank you so much. What a fantastic, specific example. And as you're hearing Rubin's story, did everybody hear Rubin's story? I could paraphrase it for you. If you heard Rubin's story right there, ask yourself this. If you had been a player in that room, would you have gone up to a head volleyball coach at a Division I school and said, "Coach, I have a question about this. I may have a problem with this." Just ask yourself. You don't need to answer this out loud, but would you have done that? So the words that come up that we talk about these things are bystanders and upstanders. Have you guys in your school hazing or your school bullying programs or just what you've seen in class come across these terms? Side note, many schools are already doing hazing and bullying prevention programs. We certainly encourage the trainers to ask before doing this workshop or workshop that includes these topics if there's school-wide language or policy around these things. So the bystander, somebody real quick definition, what's a bystander? If you see the volleyball coach use an incorrect term that may be inadvertently derogatory, what would a bystander do? What is the action of a bystander?
They don't say anything. They see something and they just let it happen even if they know it's wrong.
Absolutely. And there's this law of diffused responsibility. Well, nobody else is really saying anything. So it's easy to be a bystander. Many of us are bystanders in certain situations. How about this other word? This is a strange one. What would if you know the word, what would an upstander do? What is an upstander? And what would they do in that situation? Now, I'll give you a hint. Coach Nieves already answered it. But what would an upstander do?
Stand up against whatever was not right.
There you go. And as simple a phrase as that is, the activity itself is not simple. Let's think about this through a scenario. I'm on a team that hazes, and I'm just not sure what to do about it. Let's make as many tables as we can of 4 different suits of cards from your cards. So get up, move around, and let's talk about this for 2 minutes. Let's talk about what can you do, what should you do if you're on a team that hazes. ready, go. And you talk and you say brilliant stuff at your tables, and I call you back and I ask you about them in theory. So you had a lot of great ideas. That was fantastic. And I really liked, especially what Maggie said, because I always know who she is. And so we talked about something. Here's one process, one framework for handling this situation that we've worked on with another national group that works with bullying and hazing. So we call the 3 Ds. The first is to direct, or is to be direct. So you can just say, hey, guys, stop it. This isn't who we want to be. This isn't who we are. The second is to delegate. And this is a big one. Hazing can be dangerous. Hazing can be scary. There's a lot of really questionable and difficult outcomes that can come from hazing. This is the time to go get a coach. This is the time to go talk to your athletic director. This is the time to talk to somebody in authority who really does have the power to help change this behavior. And then finally, if you're in the situation and you're not comfortable stepping up to your teammates and saying, hey guys, stop this, maybe, and I'm certainly not endorsing lying here, but maybe it's time to just create a distraction. Hey, there's something going on in the hall. There's a teacher coming. Hey, the coach is coming down the hall. And just at least take care to reduce the harm to the player or players who are being mistreated, that have been singled out really for mistreatment. So here's an interesting thing. Do you recall what I said is the actually Maggie said it too. What is one psychological reason for hazing? That's not that bad. It's not a bad reason. What did Maggie say? Somebody other than Maggie, so I know who you are. Paraphrase.
Team building.
Team building. Yeah, you get to be on my team. You get to be on my family, in my family. So hazing is one way to achieve that. From what you've said and from what we've talked about, probably not a way that makes us better. And the title of this workshop is Making Teammates Better. So another way is how we welcome new players. And we talk about different ways. New players on the team, when are they most nervous, do you think? When are they most vulnerable? When's it hard? When's it hard to be on your team?
When they're new.
At the beginning, when they're new.
At the beginning, absolutely. And certainly you're not just on a team, you're in a program. You're in the freshman team, but man, you want to play varsity someday. And that's, the difference between my freshmen and my seniors is pretty large in terms of how they're ready to take on those tough challenges when they're new to the team. So we want to make teammates better. We want to make our team better. So we can come up with some formal ways of doing this. So positive initiation. I want you to walk out of here with that term. I want you to walk out of here with positive initiation. And what positive initiation does, and I'm going to explain what it is in a minute. I can kind of go in reverse. Here are the results of it. It makes teammates feel like they're playing together. It bonds them. It makes team members feel like it really matters to be on the team. And guess what? That's exactly what Maggie said. Had the same intent in many ways as hazing without harming anybody, without scaring anybody, and certainly without excluding or demeaning anybody. And it gains commitment to hard work for the team's success. It makes your team better. You play better. You have more of a chance of winning. Now, here's a question for you. Does anybody in here play on a team that has a formal process of positive initiation? And could you quickly describe it? And somebody would do that. We're going to jump past that, but I know you would do it. Here's one from a colleague of mine at Positive Coaching Alliance. His name is Rich Przinski, and he coaches in Wisconsin. So this is a video showing how Rich and his team initiate players onto their team. I know we can't hear this, so this is, I'm sure many of you have seen this. If not, it's in the standard PowerPoint deck.
I hear it now, Joe.
There you go. See? I've improved the entire platform.
Once a Hilltopper.
Always Hilltopper. Thanks, baby. I'm going to give us a chance. I'm sure many of us have seen this. It is a fantastic video. We're really lucky to have this and have this great example of doing this. So what happened with this team? They won state. And there is a direct connection between feeling safe emotionally and psychologically on your team and being a better team. So welcoming new teammates formally includes positive initiation. Oops, I did not mean to click there, and my join me is having a problem here. Sorry about that. It will not go backward. All right. So before we do this, before we move on to the next section, what I'd like to do, those of you who said that they have positive initiation formulas and procedures on their team, I'd like you to be table leaders. Those of you who don't, get to one of the table leaders and get together as a group and come up with something a team might use as positive initiation. You have 3 minutes. Go. You all do that. You come up with brilliant stuff. And I would love to hand this workshop back over to my colleague, Ruben.
So Joe, please, let's pretend like you didn't click forward, Joe. Go back a slide. Okay, so as we wrap up here, as we wrap up our workshop, I want to ask the group, triple impact competitor. Give me the 3 parts of being a triple impact competitor. Go ahead and tell me the first one.
Making yourself better.
Very good. How about the second part?
Making your teammates better.
And the third part?
Making the game better.
Thank you. All right, click forward, Joe. So in today's workshop, we really focused on the second part of being a triple impact competitor, making teammates better. And the 4 areas we addressed were these. 1, being a teammate that fills the emotional tanks of the players around you. One very important way of making your teammates better. 2 is playing a leadership role and understanding that high-performing teams get leadership from all directions, and that leadership is for all, not just the star player or the captain. Standing up against hazing, that many teams and athletes around the country incorrectly think that hazing makes their team better in some way, and that's not the case. The evidence shows, the stories we hear from great coaches and athletes around the country is that hazing does not make a team better. It does not make their boat go faster. And then finally, instead of hazing, what's an alternative? It's making new players feel welcome, including through a positive initiation. Let's take a look at this. Let's see if any of you remember this this play from the 2014 World Series. Are you guys able to hear the sound?
Nope.
Okay.
We probably only heard the Marquette one because Rich was just saying it.
So, does anybody remember this play, and can you describe what happened there in that play? So in this play, it was originally called 1 out at second base, and then when it went to instant replay, the call was changed and it was a double play. Whether the call had been changed or not, it was a spectacular play and helped the Giants go on to win this game and clinch the 2014 World Series championship. After the game, Joe Panik, the second baseman who made that play, he was a rookie on the Giants. He was interviewed after the game, and here's what he had to say. So, Joe, that was an amazing play, blah, 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 blah. How were you able to play such an important role on this team? And Joe Panik went on to say, well, quite honestly, I never felt like a new player. I never felt like a rookie because on this team, all the new players were made to feel welcome and a part of the family. He said something like that. He said it a lot more eloquently, but that's kind of the message.
By the way, Ruben, I need to chime in right here and applaud Kelly Kratz for solving the sound problem. I was muting myself, and that was why the sound was muted. Thank you, Kelly Kratz. You're good.
Okay, well, we'll know that for next time, huh?
Yeah. Thanks, Phil.
So if you haven't already visited PCA Development Zone, I want to encourage you to take a look at it. Any questions you have about competing, about being a champion, about being a triple impact competitor, you can type them in. This is a searchable source of tools and resources, and you can plug it in. What do I do when my captains are mean to me? And see what suggestions PCA has for you. Encourage you to use that. I want to thank everybody very much for jumping in and participating in the workshop. Really, Joe, and my pleasure to be here with you all today. Joe and I want this workshop to be fun. We want it to be helpful. We want to become better trainers. So we're going to pass out an evaluation form, and any feedback you're willing to give us on today's workshop, we would greatly appreciate it. Joe and I will be around a little bit to answer some questions. Thank you once again, and have a great year. All right. So,
that's a serious. Ruben, do you keep the Ruben slide? I'm actually curious.
I do. I just. Yeah, I do. Yeah. And then, Adam, thank you for, Adam sent me an email during the workshop and pointed out to us that Julie Johnson is now Julie Ertz, that she married Zach Ertz of the Philadelphia Eagles, and actually the name on her uniform now, she uses her married name of Ertz. So Adam, thank you for pointing that out to us. And Joe, Kelly, and I get, that's another update we need to make. We really appreciate knowing this. In this case, I wasn't aware of it. With players trading, trades and sent to new teams, and some of those details, it can be a challenge to keep up with. So thank you, Adam. I want to start the discussion part. Actually, before I go to Brandon's 2 questions that he emailed to us, any questions, comments about the demo from the group? So, Adam, Courtney, are you on?
I am.
Okay. So, I asked Courtney if she would help us address Adam's 2 great questions.
Brandon?
Brandon's 2 great questions. Let me see if I can pull up the questions. Do you have them in front of you, Courtney?
I do, yep.
Okay, yeah, I'll let you take it from here.
All right, cool. Brandon, thank you for these questions. What I'm going to share are sort of my thoughts off the top of my head on some of these. Maybe some of them might be questions, have you already asked the partner these things? Or, so in other words, I don't know that there's necessarily right or wrong answers to both of these, but I think they're great topics. So let's dive into them. The first one was, many of our partners really appreciate the hazing part of our Making Teammates Better workshop. However, some schools have separate programs that already address the topic of hazing. If a partner wanted to cut the hazing part of this workshop, is there another content block that could be added? So great question. If I got that question or that pushback from a partner, I'd want to know, what is the other hazing program that you do? Do all of your athletes go through that? Is this workshop that we're about to do for athletes, is it for everybody? Is it for captains? Is it for freshmen? So really digging in on the details there. I think sometimes when you dig in on the details, it shows, well, okay, maybe half of the group has been to it, but not everybody. So that would be one area, like making sure that we're digging in on the details of that and not just taking them at their word that because they have another hazing program that everyone who will be in this workshop has attended that. The second thing is that, and Ruben and I were talking about this with regard to our social media workshop as well. You know, a lot of, certainly PCA isn't the only one in these schools talking about social media or hazing. These topics come up not only from other third parties, but maybe they're happening in the classroom as well. You know, they're integrated with the normal teachers. So it's really important to know what else is going on, but also reinforcement isn't bad. So I think part of this might be pushing back on them and saying, okay, well, tell me about what you've already talked about, you know, and obviously hazing is typically more sports focused than necessarily social media, but for both of those, you know, is it discussed in the sports setting? You know, was that at the beginning of the year and this is later in the year? So I feel like these messages aren't bad for kids to hear more than once, and hopefully we're doing it in a way that's different. So if you can say like, well, what was that session like? Was it scenario based? What were they talking about there? You know, because we could talk about it in a way that maybe it strikes someone a little differently. You know, they think about it in a different way. So that's the second thing. You know, in addition to finding out more information, the second thing would be to say, we'd love to just still address this topic. We feel like it's that important, and we're talking about it in the sense of, you know, from the angle of positive initiation. And then in the end, I might say, Brandon, like, if they don't want to talk about hazing, this might not be the right workshop for them. Certainly, you know, we could do something just around leadership if we want to do that. So that's absolutely possible. But maybe, you know, is this the right next step for them after a TIC workshop if they don't want to talk about that topic? I don't know if does that help at all?
Courtney, this is Joe. Could I add one thing to that, just from my experience with trainer calls on this particular issue? One thing I've actually heard, not frequently, but more than a few times, is an athletic director or person who we're contacting regarding the workshop saying, yeah, that's not really a problem that we have here. We're not that type of school. And we've certainly worked with so many high-profile hazing incidents that some, if not all, of the athletics administration people didn't know were going on at the time. So it's another, as Courtney's suggesting, the careful questions we ask, it's another thing to pursue.
And Brandon, the other thing I'll say is, you know, as part of the character and leadership development program, we've talked about like, hey, there's enough in making teammates better that we could separate that out into two different workshops. You could have a workshop just on leadership, and we could have a separate workshop on hazing and positive initiation. So it's certainly possible that you could just focus on the leadership part, and maybe the hazing is much diminished, you know. So we have that as precedent. So you could just focus more on that first part of it. But I guess, again, I would maybe make sure those first two areas of discussion are had before we would go to that.
Yeah.
Does that help, Brandon?
Yeah. I just have one more comment to make on that line. I agree with you. I've been involved in high school programs that have had hazing programs, and they're all what not to do. They don't give alternatives for teams, and it doesn't make teams realize the purpose behind the hazing. It's just basically like the administration coming down saying zero tolerance policy. This is what hazing is. If we catch you, these are going to be the responses, and the kids have to sign a contract saying, yes, we will not haze, yada, yada, yada. So I think, you know, as Courtney said, if they already have a hazing program, I think the trainer would know to keep that portion of it short. But the one thing that we offer that schools don't usually is alternatives, the positive initiation, the value of that, and actually having the kids come up with ideas on how they can welcome new players onto their team with the same results. So it's not necessarily a deal breaker if they already have a hazing program going on in their school.
Yeah, I think that's all helpful. Thank you very much, Courtney and Kelly and everybody who contributed. That's very helpful. I think with hazing becoming more and more of a publicized issue, schools are having to face it and bring, you know, other programs in, and the AD, you know, kind of not wanting to repeat something or fatigue on a certain subject. That was just something that's come up a couple of different times, but I think your ideas of pushing back a little bit on that and making sure that, number one, what are they covering, but then also making sure that the reinforcement of the ideas and then replacing it with something else as far as positive initiation is kind of the key part of the workshop. So I appreciate the help.
Yeah, Brandon, and I know you're good at communicating with trainers and making sure that they're up to speed on what the partners are looking for. But this is, we all know the notes in EMS for trainers are so important. If you can give the trainers a heads up, if you've been able to dig into some conversation around what a school's already done around hazing or bullying or social media, depending on the workshop that you're doing, including that for the trainer, I mean, it's just going to set them up for so much more success, and it's going to set you up for more success as well. So I just encourage you to dig into that, even if it's not something that they bring up, to ask them, okay, I see that you want to do this workshop. Do you guys have anything else that you're doing for your students or your athletes around this topic? I mean, most likely they are, like you said, Brandon. So that's really important. I'll move to the second question, and then if anybody else has comments on either of these. The second question was, the audience for multi-year and multi-workshop high school partners is increasingly mixed. Some athletes new to PCA and some who recently attended a TIC workshop. For these mixed groups, does the training team recommend TIC or making teammates better? With either choice, are there any key points that should be communicated to the assigned trainer to help them navigate a mixed group? I think everybody knows that even though we suggest, okay, in year one, a coach can do double goal coach one, in year two, they should do, X, Y, or Z. Same thing with athletes. We all know that whatever room a trainer walks into, there's a percentage of people who've seen it before, there's a percentage of people who haven't, and so often there are mixed groups, right? And so I know Kelly and Joe and Ruben, you can talk this a little bit more, but I know in many of the workshops that I've been to, if not most or all, the trainer, one of the first things the trainer asks is, can I get a show of hands who's been to a PCA workshop before, who's been to this workshop before, just to get that sense. And of course, that's something that oftentimes they touch on ahead of time. Brandon, I'm going to, at the risk of stating the obvious and saying things that you probably already do, I'm going to say a couple things here. One is, to me, if we're having mixed groups year after year after year at the same partner, I might question the structure of the partnership a little bit. In other words, and I know budgets are not infinite, but is it possible to separate those out? If it's truly 50-50, wow, every year, we're supposed to be doing this, but or every year we have everyone go through all of them. And so, of course, the freshmen every year have never seen it before, and you're still doing the same workshop as everyone else who's been there. Is there some way to break that down so that you don't have to do the mixed? I think sometimes it's because of budget, but sometimes it's because the AD is not necessarily tracking who's been through it, or they're not really thinking it through. I'm going to hold an athlete workshop again this year. So again, pushing back a little bit, being that expert and saying, hey, can we think about who's going to be there this year? Have they been there before? So let's assume you've done all that and they still are only going to hold one athlete workshop, and it's going to be a mixed group. I think then, is it 50-50 mix? Do we know that 10% of the people are new and 90% have been there before? That, I think that will impact whether or not we would recommend TIC or making teammates better. If 90%, 75% of the people have been there before, you probably want to move them along to the next one, and then the trainer can know, hey, maybe I do a little bit more on the review up front, knowing that a quarter of the audience has never seen this before. I know as well as anyone that it's tough to get people on the phone. It's tough to ask all the ideal questions you want to ask, but I think the more details and the more information we can have ahead of time, the more likely the workshop is going to be successful, and the trainer will know what's in the room. Does that help, Brandon, or did that just state all the obvious?
No, I think that helps. Yeah, I mean, part of the obvious part of it is I like that idea. Hey, look, if we continue to have the same mixed group over and over again, that the plan going into the partnership probably wasn't very strong for us to end up with that same group all the time.
Yeah.
We end up with a lot of kind of either or, where a partner will decide that they want to do a leadership kind of captain's council or leadership council during one specific season, like a fall, spring, or winter, or they'll do something where it's the same kids throughout the year. And either way they do, if it's the first one where it's just throughout the seasons, there's always the kids that play in multiple seasons.
Yeah.
And then if we get into a second year, then some of the kids are new and some of the kids have been there. So it's come up more and more. But I think having a better plan to make sure that we are addressing it ahead of time is key. But I know that at the same time, athletic directors are really hard to get a hold of. They're overworked.
Yeah,
There's
totally.
not enough hours in the day. So coming up with these plans is really difficult. But I do like the idea of knowing, relying on our trainers to ask that question at the beginning to figure out what the mix is, and knowing that we can if the mix is more than we thought it was with new players or new athletes, that we can, we can always do a quick recap. And I think even in watching this, Making Teammates Better, there were several points where Ruben reemphasized what filling emotional tank was, or
right.
kind of at the beginning of the workshop went through the 3 points. So I think that doing overemphasizing a recap does help.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that, it's so easy. You can see how a school could get into the situation where there's mixed audience year after year. Like even if there's a well-intentioned plan, it just happens. So I think you as a PM, knowing where you've seen this work really well, like okay, if the schools that do freshmen every year, or the schools that that ensures that every year there's a new batch and you know what they've done, you know what they haven't done, or they have the upperclassmen do X, Y, or Z. You could suggest to them like, hey, where I've seen this work well is when they do this plan, and an AD may say, oh, great, that's a great idea, let's do that. Or he or she may say, yeah, I hear you, but we need something for this leadership group, and then you may just have to deal with it, right? Like you may have to just work it out the best you can. But I think sometimes it's just hard to get a hold of them. And it just happens, right? We all know that. I guess the idea is just to make sure that when possible, you feel like you're equipped with being assertive enough and with the right questions to make it successful, in that ideal situation where you can get a hold of them and you can have a little bit of a discussion.
Definitely. Thank you.
Anybody else have questions around the workshop?
Hey, Courtney, it's Marty. I was thinking during the hazing section, this also relates to the book we're reading right now about the power of moments, and it talks about, moments of courage and how we have to practice those moments of courage. I don't remember any scenarios where we actually make them practice, like being a upstander, kind of like we have them go through the scenario on, helping motivate unmotivated teammates and things like that. Did we have a scenario in there on the hazing side too?
Marty, I'll turn that one to you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did we?
Yeah, Marty, what a great observation. No, we don't have that. So I think that's something for us to take a look at and consider. It could be as simple as having them practice with a partner. Direct intervention, practice delegating, and practice distracting, the 3 Ds. So I like that a lot.
What's funny, Marty, and I'm grateful you asked that. I had a moment when I was doing that section where I thought, this should be a role play. Why am I not doing a role play?
Yeah.
Maybe I should backtrack. Because it's those kind of moments of inspiration that definitely shape how we improve our workshops.
Marty, so I did this workshop at the college level for a specific team, and the coach specifically told me that drinking was a major problem. So I just switched the scenario to drinking, and we did it as a role play. Like, what do you do if you're at a party? And so, we all know we can tailor scenarios, but it was really, really helpful. That was just specifically on alcohol, but really helpful for them to just turn to a partner. What would you say if somebody said, hey, come on, just have a drink? Anytime in a workshop you can get coaches or the kids to say the language that they would use and put them in that situation. I agree 100%. I think it's awesome.
Marty, I think, whenever we read these book club books, it's like some of the concepts may seem really interesting, but they're not really, you're kind of like, I don't know if this really applies, or like, should we be taking this as the way we should do things? And, so there's certainly some stuff from the book that may or may not apply to PCA or your personal life, but I feel like one thing that has energized a lot of people is this whole idea, we talked about it on the last book club, of practice and role playing and kind of rolling your sleeves up and experiencing whatever it is you're doing, and that creates these moments. And so I feel like if we could fast forward a year, you might see us in the middle of workshop revisions with a focus on that. How can we really make our workshops, we already have the goal of making them interactive, and the trainers do such a great job of that, but how can we try to incorporate as much practice and role playing and, really having coaches or leaders or parents or athletes put themselves in this situation to try a tool or try out a principle or do this or that, so that when they get back out on the field or court, there's some muscle memory there of what they've done. I think that's a foreshadowing of where we're headed. But I think your example there is just spot on of a time where we could incorporate that.
Kelly mentioned tailoring workshops and how she tailored this particular workshop recently. Joe and I actually brought two tailored pieces to this demo. And I want to ask those of you who've seen this workshop before or experienced it before, can you identify where Joe and I tailored it? I'll give you a clue. It has to do with video. Both of them have to do with videos that we brought to the workshop.
The last Making Teammates Better workshop I saw didn't have the college football video at the beginning. It had something else. So Brandon, that was one piece of tailoring. Joe and I wanted to start the workshop off with a more current example than the Julie Ertz soccer example. And so we brought that one in, and that video we had already shared with trainers in the approved workshop videos folder. And some trainers have used it, whether it's for this workshop, a TIC workshop, or other workshops. They've used that. Joe went above and beyond. Besides inserting the video, he created 2 slides to go with it. He got approval from me and used them in the opening. We decided that we wanted to keep the Julie Ertz video in there, an example in there, because so many of the other examples in the workshop involve male athletes. We didn't want to eliminate the female athlete example. So we decided to use both of them in the opening piece of the workshop. So Brandon, that was one of the customization, or not customizations, one of the tailoring pieces we did for this workshop. Does anybody know which other video was a tailored piece? Anybody care to take a guess? Kelly, do you know? Putting Kelly on the spot.
I thought that was the first rule of workshops, never put somebody on the spot.
That's Joe's rule, not my rule. He hasn't convinced me yet. So the other one was the Kevin Durant video. And maybe you didn't recognize that as tailoring because it has been a standard video in some past workshops. We used to have a version, this is 5 years ago, of the TIC workshop where almost all the video examples came out of Kevin Durant's MVP acceptance speech, and this was one of those clips. And so we brought that video in here as an example of a way a high-level athlete filled the emotional tank of a teammate. So those are the 2 tailored pieces. Okay, I see we're approaching the end of our time here. Rich, is there anything else you want to say or ask or cover before we adjourn?
I'd just like to thank you, Joe, Ruben, Courtney, Kelly, for all of your time in prepping for the demo today and all the demos we've done thus far. Thanks to everyone that participated today. Hopefully you guys found it insightful and valuable, especially in terms of the ways that we support our partners out in the field. Just note that we are not going to do a demo during the month of April, given that we're all going to be out in California together, and we will resume our demos come the month of May.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.